Chapter 23. It was that soft cough of Jeeves's, which always reminds me of a very old sheep clearing its throat on a distant mountain top. He coughed it at me, if you remember, on the occasion when I first swam into his ken wearing the alpine hat. It generally signifies disapproval, but I've known it to occur also when he's about to touch on a topic of a delicate nature. And when he spoke, I knew that that was what he was going to do now, for there was a sort of hushed note in his voice. "I wonder if I might have a moment of your time, miss." "Of course, Jeeves." "It is with reference to Mr. Wooster." "Oh, yes." "I must begin by saying that I chanced to be passing the door when Lord Sidcup was speaking to you, and inadvertently overheard his lordship's observations on the subject of Mr. Wooster. His lordship has a carrying voice, and I find myself in a somewhat equivocal position, torn between loyalty to my employer and a natural desire to do my duty as a citizen." "I don't understand you, Jeeves," said Madeline, which made two of us. He coughed again. "I am anxious not to take a liberty, miss, but if I may speak frankly—" "Please do." "Thank you, miss. His lordship's words seem to confirm a rumour which is circulating in the servants' hall that you are contemplating a matrimonial union with Mr. Wooster. Would it be indiscreet of me if I were to inquire if this is so?" "Yes, Jeeves, it is quite true." "If you will pardon me for saying so, I think you are making a mistake." "Well spoken, Jeeves. You are on the right lines," I was saying to myself, and I hoped he was going to rub it in. I waited anxiously for Madeline's reply, a little afraid that she would draw herself to her full height and dismiss him from her presence. But she didn't. She merely said again that she didn't understand him. "If I might explain, miss, I am loath to criticize my employer, but I feel that you should know that he is a kleptomaniac." "What?" "Yes, miss. I had hoped to be able to preserve his little secret, as I have always done hitherto, but he has now gone to lengths which I cannot countenance. In going through his effects this afternoon, I discovered this small black figure concealed beneath his underwear." I heard Madeline utter a sound like a dying soda-water siphon. "But that belongs to my father." "If I may say so, nothing belongs to anyone if Mr. Wooster takes a fancy to it." "Then Lord Sidcup was right?" Precisely, miss. "He said Mr. Wooster tried to steal my father's umbrella." "I heard him, and the charge was well founded. Umbrellas, jewellery, statuettes, they are all grist to Mr. Wooster's mill. I do not think he can help it. It is a form of mental illness, but whether a jury would take that view, I cannot say." Madeline went into the soda siphon routine once more. "You mean he might be sent to prison?" "It is a contingency that seems to me far from remote." Again I felt that he was on the right lines. His trained senses told him that if there's one thing that puts a gal off marrying a chap, it is the thought that the honeymoon may be spoiled at any moment by the arrival of inspectors at the love nest come to scoop him in for larceny. No young bride likes that sort of thing, and you can't blame her if she finds herself preferring to team up with someone like Spode, who, though a gorilla in fairly human shape, is known to keep strictly on the right side of the law. I could almost hear Madeline's thoughts turning in this direction, and I applauded Jeeves's sound grip on the psychology of the individual, as he calls it. Of course, I could see that all this wasn't going to make my position in the Bassett home any too good, but there are times when only the surgeon's knife will serve, and I had the sustaining thought that if ever I got out from behind this sofa, I could sneak off to where my car waited champing at the bit, and drive off Londonwards without stopping to say goodbye and thanks for a delightful visit. This would obviate—is it obviate?—all unpleasantness. Madeline continued shaken. "Oh, dear. Oh, dear," she said. "Yes, miss." "This has come as a great shock." "I can readily appreciate it, miss." "Have you known of this long?" "Ever since I entered Mr. Wooster's employment." "Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Well, thank you, Jeeves." "Not at all, miss." I think Jeeves must have shimmered off after this, for silence fell, and nothing happened except that my nose began to tickle. I would have given 10 quid to have been able to sneeze, but this, of course, was outside the range of practical politics. I just crouched there, thinking of this and that, and after quite a while the door opened once more, this time to admit something in the nature of a mob scene. I could see 3 pairs of shoes, and deduced that they were those of Spode, Pop Bassett, and Plank. Spode, it will be recalled, had gone to fetch Pop, and Plank presumably had come along for the ride, hoping no doubt for something moist at journey's end. Spode was the first to speak, and his voice rang with the triumph that comes into the voices of suitors who have caught a dangerous rival bending.
"Here we are," he said. "I brought Sir Watkin to support my statement that Wooster is a low sneak thief who goes about snapping up everything that isn't nailed down. You agree, Sir Watkin?"
"Of course I do, Roderick. It's only a month or so ago that he and that aunt of his stole my cow creamer."
"What's a cow creamer?"
asked Plank. "A silver cream jug, one of the gems of my collection."
"They got away with it, did they?"
"They did."
"Ah," said Plank. "Then in that case I think I'll have a whisky and soda."
Pop Bassett was warming to his theme. His voice rose above the hissing of Plank's siphon. "And it was only by the mercy of Providence that Wooster didn't make off with my umbrella that day in the Brompton Road. If that young man has one defect more marked than another, it is that he appears to be totally ignorant of the distinction between meum and tuum. He came up before me in my court once, I remember, charged with having stolen a policeman's helmet, and it is a lasting regret to me that I merely fined him £5.
"Mistaken kindness,"
said Spode. "So I've always felt, Roderick. A sharper lesson might have done him all the good in the world."
"Never does to let these fellows off lightly," said Plank. "I had a servant chap in Mozambique who used to help himself to my cigars, and I foolishly overlooked it because he assured me he'd got religion and everything would be quite all right from now on. It wasn't a week later that he'd skipped out, taking with him a box of Havanas and my false teeth, which he sold to one of the native chiefs in the neighbourhood. Cost me a case of trade gin and 2 strings of beads to get 'em back. Severity's the only thing, the iron hand, anything else is mistake of a weakness."
Madeline gave a sob. At least it sounded like a sob.
"But, Daddy,
"Well?"
I don't think Bertie can help himself."
"My dear child, it is precisely his habit of helping himself to anything he can lay his hands on that we are criticising."
I mean, he's a kleptomaniac."
"Eh? Who told you that?"
"Jeeves.
"That's odd. How did the subject come up?"
He told me when he gave me this. He found it in Bertie's room. He was very worried about it."
There was a spot of silence, of a stunned nature, I imagine. Then Pop Bassett said, "Good heavens," and Spode said, "Good Lord," and Plank said, "Why, that's that little thingamy I sold you, Bassett, isn't it?" Madeline gave another sob, and my nose began to tickle again. "Well, this is astounding," said Pop. "He found it in Wooster's room, you say?"
"Concealed beneath his underwear."
Pop Bassett uttered a sound like the wind going out of a dying duck. "How right you were, Roderick. You said his motive in coming here was to steal this, but how he got into the collection room I cannot understand."
"These fellows have their methods. Seems to be a great demand for that thing," said Plank. "There was a young slab of damnation with a criminal face round at my place only yesterday trying to sell it to me. Wooster! No, it wasn't Wooster. My fellow's name was Alpine Joe. Wooster would naturally adopt a pseudonym. I suppose he would. I never thought of that."
"Well, after this," said Pop Bassett.
"Yes, after this," said Spode. "You're certainly not going to marry the man, Madeline. He's worse than Finknottle." "Who's Finknottle?" asked Plank.
"The one who eloped with Stoker," said Pop.
"Who's Stoker?" asked Plank.
I don't think I've ever come across a fellow with a greater thirst for information. "The cook."
"Oh, yes, I remember you telling me. Knew what he was doing, that chap. I'm strongly opposed to anyone marrying anybody, but if you're going to marry someone, you unquestionably save something from the wreck by marrying a woman who knows what to do with a joint of beef. There was a fellow I knew in the Federated Malay States who—"
It would probably have been a diverting anecdote, but Spode didn't let him get on with it any further. Addressing Madeline, he said,
"What you are going to do is marry me, and I don't want any argument. How about it, Madeline?"
"Yes, Roderick. I will be your wife."
Spode uttered a whoop which made my nose tickle worse than ever.
"That's the stuff. That's how I like to hear you talk. Come on out into the garden. I have much to say to you."
I imagined that at this juncture he must have folded her in his embrace and hustled her out, for I heard the door close. And as it did so, Pop Bassett uttered a whoop somewhat similar in its intensity to the one that had proceeded from the Spode lips. He was patently bumps-a-daisy, and one could readily understand why. A father whose daughter, after nearly marrying Gussie Finknottle and then nearly marrying me, sees the light and hooks onto a prosperous member of the British aristocracy is entitled to rejoice. I didn't like Spode, and would have been glad at any time to see a Peruvian matron spike him in the leg with her dagger, but there was no denying that he was hot stuff matrimonially. "Lady Sidcup," said Pop, rolling the words round his tongue like vintage port.
"Who's Lady Sidcup?"
asked Plank, anxious as always to keep abreast.
My daughter will shortly be. One of the oldest titles in England. That was Lord Sidcup, who has just left us.
I thought his name was Roderick.
His Christian name is Roderick.
Ah, said Plank. Now I've got it. Now I have the whole picture. Your daughter was to have married someone called Finknottle.
Yes.
Then she was to have married this chap Wooster, or Alpine Joe, as the case may be.
Yes.
Well, now she's going to marry Lord Sidcup.
Yes.
Clear as crystal, said Plank. I knew I should get it threshed out in time. Simply a matter of concentration and elimination. You approve this marriage? As far, he added, as one can approve of any marriage.
I most certainly do.
Then I think this calls for another whiskey and soda.
I will join you,
said Pop Bassett. It was at this point, unable to hold it back any longer, that I sneezed.
I knew there was something behind that sofa,
said Plank, rounding it, and subjecting me to the sort of look he had once given native chiefs who couldn't grasp the rules of rugby football.
Odd sounds came from that direction, good God. It's Alpine Joe.
It's Wooster.
Who's Wooster? Oh, you told me, didn't you? What steps do you propose to take?
I have rung for Butterfield.
Who's Butterfield?
My butler.
What do you want the butler for?
To tell him to bring oats.
Who's Oates?
Our local policeman. He's having a glass of whiskey in the kitchen.
Whiskey,
said Plank thoughtfully, and as if reminded of something, went to the side table. The door opened.
Oh, Butterfield, will you tell Oates to come here?
Very good, Sir Watkin.
Bit out of condition, that chap,
said Plank, eyeing Butterfield's retreating back.
Wants a few games of rugger to put him in shape. What are you going to do about this Alpine Joe fellow? Are you going to charge him?
I certainly am. No doubt he assumed that I would shrink from causing a scandal, but he was wrong. I shall let the law take its course.
Quite right. Soak him to the utmost limit. You're a justice of the peace, aren't you?
I am, and intend to give him 28 days in the 2nd Division.
Or 60. Nice round number, 60. You couldn't make it 6 months, I suppose.
I fear not.
No, I imagine you have a regular tariff. Ah, well, 28 days is better than nothing.
Police Constable Oates, said Butterfield in the doorway. Chapter 24. I don't know why it is, but there's something about being hauled off to a police bin that makes you feel a bit silly. At least that's how it always affects me. I mean, there you are, you and the arm of the law, toddling along side by side, and you feel that in a sense he's your host, and you ought to show an interest and try to draw him out. But it's so difficult to hit on anything in the nature of an exchange of ideas, and conversation never really flows. I remember at my private school, the one I won a prize for scripture knowledge at, the Rev. Aubrey Upjohn, the top brass, used to take us one by one for an educational walk on Sunday afternoons, and I always found it hard to sparkle when my turn came to step out at his side. It was the same on this occasion when I accompanied Constable Oates to the village coop. It's no good my pretending the thing went with a swing, because it didn't. Probably, if I'd been one of the top-notchers, about to do a 10 years stretch for burglary or arson or what-not, it would have been different. But I was only one of the small fry who get 28 days in the 2nd Division, and I couldn't help thinking the officer was looking down on me. Not actually sneering, perhaps, but aloof in his manner, as if feeling I wasn't much for a cop to get his teeth into. And of course there was another thing. Speaking of my earlier visit to Totley Towers, I mentioned that when Pop Bassett immured me in my room, he stationed the local police force on the lawn below to see that I didn't nip out of the window. That local police force was this same Oates, and as it was raining like the dickens at the time, no doubt the episode had rankled. Only a very sunny constable can look with an indulgent eye on the fellow responsible for his getting the nastiest cold in the head of his career. At any rate, he showed himself now a man of few words, though good at locking people up in cells. There was only one at the Totley and the Wold Emporium, and I had it all to myself. A cosy little apartment, with a window, not barred but too small to get out of, a grill in the door, a plank bed, and that rather powerful aroma of drunks and disorderlies which you always find in these homes from home. Whether it was superior or inferior to the one they had given me at Bosher Street, I was unable to decide. Not much in it either way, it seemed to me. To say that when I turned in on the plank bed I fell into a dreamless sleep would be deceiving my public. I passed a somewhat restless night. I could have sworn, indeed, that I didn't drop off at all, but I suppose I must have done, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was coming through the window, and mine host was bringing me breakfast. I got outside it with an appetite unusual with me at such an early hour, and at the conclusion of the meal I fished out an old envelope, and did what I have sometimes done before, when the bludgeonings of fate were up and about to any extent, viz., make a list of credits and debits, as I believe Robinson Crusoe used to. The idea being to see whether I was ahead of or behind the game at the moment of going to press. The final score worked out as follows. Credit. Not at all a bad breakfast, that. Coffee quite good. I was surprised. Debit. Don't always be thinking of your stomach, you jailbird. Who's a jailbird? You're a jailbird. Well, yes, I suppose I am, if you care to put it that way. But I am innocent. My hands are clean. More than your face is. Not looking my best, what? You look like something the cat brought in. Bath will put that right. And you'll get one in prison. You really think it'll come to that? Well, you heard what Pop Bassett said. I wonder what it's like doing 28 days. Hitherto, I've always just come for the night. You'll hate it. It'll bore you stiff. I don't know so much. They give you a cake of soap and a hymn book, don't they? What's the good of a cake of soap and a hymn book? I'll be able to whack up some sort of indoor game with them. And don't forget that I've not got to marry Madeline Bassett. Let's hear what you have to say to that. And the debit account didn't utter. I had baffled it. Yes, I felt, as I hunted around in case there might be a crumb of bread which I had overlooked. That amply compensated me for the vicissitudes I was undergoing. And I had been musing along these lines for a while, getting more and more reconciled to my lot, when a silvery voice spoke, making me jump like a startled grasshopper. I couldn't think where it was coming from at first, and speculated for a moment on the possibility of it being my guardian angel, though I had always thought of him, I don't know why, as being of the male sex. Then I saw something not unlike a human face at the grill, and a closer inspection told me that it was Stiffy. I hello-there'd cordially, and expressed some surprise at finding her on the premises. I wouldn't have thought Oates would have let you in. It isn't visitors' day, is it? She explained that the zealous officer had gone up to the house to see her Uncle Watkin, and that she had sneaked in when he had legged it. "Oh, Bertie," she said, "I wish I could slip you in a file." "What would I do with a file?" "Saw through the bars, of course, ass." "There aren't any bars." "Oh, aren't there? That's a difficulty. We'll have to let it go, then. Have you had breakfast?" "Just finished." "Was it all right?" "Fairly toothsome." "I'm glad to hear that, because I'm weighed down with remorse." "You are? Why?" "Use the loaf. If I hadn't pinched that statuette thing, none of this would have happened." "Oh, I wouldn't worry." "But I do worry. Shall I tell Uncle Watkin that you're innocent because I was the guilty party? You ought to have your name cleared." I put the B on this suggestion with the greatest promptitude. "Certainly not. Don't dream of it." "But don't you want your name cleared?" "Not at the expense of you taking the rap." "Uncle Watkin wouldn't send me to Chokey." "I dare say not, but Stinker would learn all and would be shocked to the core." "Whew! I didn't think of that." "Think of it now. He wouldn't be able to help asking himself if it was a prudent move for a vicar to link his lot with yours. Doubts, that's what he'd have, and qualms. It isn't as if you were going to be a gangster's moll. The gangster would be all for you swiping everything in sight, and would encourage you with word and gesture, but it's different with Stinker. When he marries you, he'll want you to take charge of the parish funds. Apprise him of the facts, and you won't have an easy moment." "I see what you mean. Yes, you have a point there. Picture his jumpiness if he found you near the Sunday offertory bag. No, secrecy and silence is the only course." She sighed a bit, as if her conscience was troubling her, but she saw the force of my reasoning. "I suppose you're right, but I do hate the idea of you doing time." "There are compensations, such as, I am saved from the scaffold." "Oh, I see what you mean. You get out of marrying Madeline." "Exactly. And as I remember telling you once, I am implying nothing derogatory to Madeline when I say that the thought of being united to her in bonds of holy wedlock was one that gave your old friend shivers down the spine. The fact is in no way to her discredit. I should feel just the same about marrying many of the world's noblest women. There are certain females whom one respects, admires, reveres, but only from a distance, and it is to this group that Madeline belongs. And I was about to develop this theme, with possibly a reference to those folk songs, when a gruff voice interrupted our tete-a-tete, if you can call a thing a tete-a-tete, when the two of you are on opposite sides of an iron grill. It was Constable Oates, returned from his excursion. Stiffy's presence displeased him, and he spoke austerely.
"What's all this?"
he demanded. "What's all what?" riposted Stiffy with spirit. and I remember thinking that she rather had him there.
It's against regulations to talk to the prisoner, miss.
Oates, said Stiffy, you're an ass. This was profoundly true, but it seemed to annoy the officer. He resented the charge and said so, and Stiffy said she didn't want any back chat from him. You road company rozzers make me sick. I was only trying to cheer him up. It seemed to me that the officer gave a bitter snort, and a moment later he revealed why he had done so.
It's me that wants cheering up, he said morosely. I've just seen Sir Watkin, and he says he isn't pressing the charge.
What? I cried. What? Yipped Stiffy.
That's what,
said the constable, and you could see that while there was sunshine above, there was none in his heart. I could sympathize with him, of course. Naturally, nothing makes a member of the force sicker than to have a criminal get away from him. He was in rather the same position as some crocodile on the Zambezi or some puma in Brazil would have been if it had earmarked Plank for its lunch and seen him shin up a high tree.
Shackling the police, that's what I call it,
he said, and I think he spat on the floor. I couldn't see him, of course, but I was aware of a spit-like sound. Stiffy whooped, well pleased, and I whooped myself, if I remember correctly. For all the bold front I had been putting up, I had never in my heart really liked the idea of rotting for 28 days in a dungeon cell. Prison is all right for a night, but you don't want to go overdoing the thing. Then what are we waiting for? Said Stiffy. Get a move on, officer. Fling wide those gates. Oates flung them, not attempting to conceal his chagrin and disappointment, and I passed with Stiffy into the great world outside the prison walls. Goodbye, Oates, I said as we left, for one always likes to do the courteous thing. It's been nice meeting you. How are Mrs. Oates and the little ones? His only reply was a sound like a hippopotamus taking its foot out of the mud on a river bank, and I saw Stiffy frown as though his manner offended her. You know, she said as we reached the open spaces, we really ought to do something about Oates, something that would teach him that we are not put into this world for pleasure alone. I can't suggest what offhand, but if we put our heads together we could think of something. You ought to stay on, Bertie, and help me bring his ginger hairs in sorrow to the grave. I raised an eyebrow. As the guest of your Uncle Watkin, you could muck in with Harold. There's a spare room at that cottage place of his. Sorry, no. You won't stay on? I will not. I intend to put as many miles as possible in as short a time as possible between Totley and the Wold and myself, and it's no good your using that expression lily-livered poltroon, because I am adamant. She made what I believe is called a moo. It's done by pushing the lips out and drawing them in again. I thought it wouldn't be any use asking you. No spirit, that's your trouble. No enterprise. I'll have to get Harold to do it. And as I stood shuddering at the picture her words conjured up, she pushed off, exhibiting dudgeon, and I was still speculating as to what tureen of soup she was planning to land the sainted Pinker in, and hoping that he would have enough sense to stay out of it, when Jeeves drove up in the car, a welcome sight.
"Good morning, sir,"
he said.
"I trust you slept well."
"Fitfully, Jeeves. Those plank beds are not easy on the fleshy parts."
"So I would be disposed to imagine, sir. And your disturbed night has left you ruffled, I am sorry to see. You are far from soigné."
I could, I suppose, have said something about way down upon the Soigné River, but I didn't. My mind was occupied with deeper thoughts. I was in pensive mood. "You know, Jeeves," I said, "one lives and learns."
"Sir?"
"I mean, this episode has been a bit of an eye-opener to me. It has taught me a lesson. I see now what a mistake one makes in labelling someone as a ruddy-gored Elpus just because he normally behaves like a ruddy-gored Elpus. Look closely, and we find humanity in the unlikeliest places."
"A broad-minded view, sir."
Take this Sir W. Bassett. In my haste, I have always pencilled him in as a hellhound without a single redeeming quality. But what do I find? He has this softer side to him. Having got Bertram out on a limb, he does not, as one would have expected, proceed to saw it off, but tempers justice with mercy, declining to press the charge. It has touched me a good deal to discover that under that forbidding exterior there lies a heart of gold. Why are you looking like a stuffed frog, Jeeves? Don't you agree with me?
"Not altogether, sir, when you attribute Sir Watkin's leniency to sheer goodness of heart. There were inducements."
"I don't dig you, Jeeves."
"I made it a condition that you be set at liberty, sir."
My inability to dig him became intensified. He seemed to me to be talking through the back of his neck, the last thing you desire in a personal attendant. "How do you mean condition?" Condition of what?
Of my entering his employment, sir. I should mention that during my visit to Brinkley Court, Sir Watkin very kindly expressed appreciation of the manner in which I performed my duties, and made me an offer to leave your service and enter his. This offer, conditional upon your release, I have accepted.
The police station at Totley in the Wold is situated in the main street of that village, and from where we were standing I had a view of the establishments of a butcher, a baker, a grocer, and a publican licensed to sell tobacco, ales, and spirits. And as I heard these words, this butcher, this baker, this grocer, and this publican seemed to pirouette before my eyes as if afflicted with St. Vitus' dance. "You're leaving me?" I gasped, scarcely able to be my E. The corner of his mouth twitched. He seemed to be about to smile, but of course thought better of it.
"Only temporarily, sir."
Again I was unable to dig him. Temporarily?
I think it more than possible that after perhaps a week or so, differences will arise between Sir Watkin and myself, compelling me to resign my position. In that event, if you are not already suited, sir, I shall be most happy to return to your employment.
I saw all. It was a ruse, and by no means the worst of them. His brain enlarged by constant helpings of fish, he had seen the way and found a formula acceptable to all parties. The mists cleared from before my eyes, and the butcher, the baker, the grocer, and the publican licensed to sell tobacco, ales, and spirits switched back again to what is called the status quo. A rush of emotion filled me. "Jeeves," I said, and if my voice shook, what of it? We Woosters are but human. "You stand alone. Others abide our question, but you don't, as the fellow said. I wish there was something I could do to repay you." He coughed that sheep-like cough of his.
"There does chance to be a favour it is within your power to bestow, sir."
"Name it, Jeeves. Ask of me what you will, even unto half my kingdom."
"If you could see your way to abandoning your alpine hat, sir."
I ought to have seen it coming. That cough should have told me. But I hadn't, and the shock was severe. For an instant I don't mind admitting that I reeled. "You would go as far as that?" I said, chewing the lower lip.
"It was merely a suggestion, sir."
I took the hat off and gazed at it. The morning sunlight played on it, and it had never looked so blue, its feather so pink. "I suppose you know you're breaking my heart."
"I am sorry, sir."
I sighed. "But as I have said, the Woosters can take it." "Very well, Jeeves. So be it." I gave him the hat. It made me feel like a father reluctantly throwing his child from the sledge to divert the attention of the pursuing wolf pack, as I believe happens all the time in Russia in the winter months. But what would you? "You propose to burn this alpine hat, Jeeves?"
"No, sir. To present it to Mr. Butterfield. He thinks it will be of assistance to him in his courtship."
"His what?"
"Mr. Butterfield is courting a widowed lady in the village, sir."
This surprised me. But surely he was 104 last birthday.
"He is well stricken in years, yes, sir, but nevertheless—"
"There's life in the old dog yet?"
Precisely, sir."
My heart melted. I ceased to think of self. It had just occurred to me that in the circumstances I would be unable to conclude my visit by tipping Butterfield. The hat would fill that gap. "All right, Jeeves. Give him the lid, and heaven speed his wooing. You might tell him that from me."
"I will make a point of doing so. Thank you very much, sir."
"Not at all, Jeeves."
That was Stiff Upper Lip Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. Read by Jonathan Cecil.